A little different. Ready to go? All right, this panel's going to be in 3D. All right.
I had no idea they were going to do that. That's fantastic.
So this is the actual prop from the film.
Someone asked if you could do it again. They want to get social video. Can you? And now an ironing board will fall on all of us. So if you couldn't tell, this is going to be Foolishness. We're talking about MuppetVision 3D, one of the most beloved attractions of all time. I think people believe it's kind of Jim's magnum opus. It's everything they learned over all their years, and you guys worked with them to bring that to life. Do you want to take us back to the earliest brainstorming, the earliest meetings? How did this all this come to be?
Well, Disney was doing a deal with Jim Henson and talking about collaboration and possible acquisition of the company. And the first thing that they want to do is get something as quickly as possible. The theme the last couple of days has been how quickly can we do this and how easily can we do this, and this just falls in that same category. So we realized that we want to do a quality attraction, but it needs to be done as efficiently and quickly as possible, but as creatively fulfilling and living up to the standards of Disney and the Muppets as possible. So that's going to take a little bit of time. So in the meantime, I think I mentioned yesterday, we did Here Come the Muppets, actually creative entertainment to that show.
And we do, Jake, there are images of that, if you want to pull that up, the big costume characters.
It was in the Dailies Theater, which we talked about earlier in the show. And that was a live show about the Muppets coming to Walt Disney World. And so that was the first thing we did. And then we did, I think that we did the Days of Swine and Roses.
Out in the back, right?
Yeah, out in the back lot.
Actually, this is that one.
Yeah,
this is outside.
that's the other one. So those two were fairly easy to produce. They were also the first time that Henson had done a walk around, not puppet costumes. So that was also advanced. But anyway, in the meantime, we had brainstormings with Jim Henson in Glendale about what we could do. We said, the best thing to do would be a new 3D movie. We had done Magic Journeys, and then we topped that with Captain EO, and it was time to take that art to the next level. And so the thing I remember the most is, of course, it was going to star the Muppets, and it was going to be in 3D, and we said, let's make it in 4D to really get into the theater more than we'd ever done before. So we started, as we do all our brainstormings, basically, with a wall and a bunch of index cards, and with the Henson people and our people, a lot more than on this stage, we started writing down ideas of what we could do, and okay, how about bubbles? Bubbles would be cool to put in the theater. What about rain? We could do rain. How about wind? You can imagine just smoke and all this stuff. Even Jim mentioned at one point, what if we blow up a chicken and the entire theater's full of feathers? So, well, that's an interesting idea. But anyway, so that's how it really started. And then based on really, this kind of seems backwards, but based on the effects we thought we could pull off, the Henson people started writing us, and with our writers, started writing a story around those effects. So if you remember the Dream a Little Dream of Me scene with Miss Piggy, the lyrics, life bubbles on, dear, were written just because we were going to do bubbles in the theater. So we adapted our show to feature the effects, so to get the most out of that. Because 3D people had seen, people love the Muppets, people love 3D, but we want to take it to the whole new level. That was really how we started.
And I, in context to the studio tour, we were creating Muppet Studios. So we were creating, and the Muppets are from New York. So the theming of our Muppet Studio was very new, with a lot of New York textures and facilities.
Yeah, we studied Richard Graham, one of our architects who worked on the original studio, studied what some of the stages were like in Astoria, New York, and other places near Manhattan and Brooklyn that they did film production. We really actually he adapted the soundstage look from Warner Brothers Studios in Los Angeles for the buildings. If you notice, they got the two sort of rooftops on which we turned into kind of eyeballs to look at. There you can see that design. Those were the adapted from Los Angeles, but with a New York flair and a lot of exposed bricks and things like that.
Yeah, so the right side here is the studio side, and then if you go over to the left, it becomes more cityscape. That's little New York street at Muppet scale.
Backlot.
A backlot, yeah. This was a model that we did early on. The Muppet Lab was actually going to be the R&D center for the studios.
And one of the things that we were looking forward to doing was Muppetizing all of the facilities. Jim, that's one thing that Jim Henson and really enjoyed doing was adding, human character and animal characters to inanimate objects.
Yeah, that started a long time ago at when they used to perform over at NBC at 30 Rock. They would go into the back stairways, and there'd be pipes of water pipes and sprinkler pipes, and they would bring ping pong balls and they would glue them, and then glue mustaches and they would Muppetize. They would turn all of these inanimate objects into characters. And as I understand it, it's still there.
It is. It's some green room or something. Yeah. Maybe it's Saturday Night Live, I think, but.
Max Weinberg's office was actually next to it, and so people would have to go through Max Weinberg's office to see the creation. And so we took the term Muppetize, and so as Eric was saying, Richard Graham, the architect, took the old studio vernacular, and then Tim Kirk did an overlay drawing eyeballs in, so all the studio spaces were actually alive in some way.
Sort of anthropomorphizing the buildings and the things, so they sort of come alike and look like all these buildings could, start singing and dancing at some point to some degree. And Tim Kirk did a great job. If you guys have been in the extended queue, it's like what Paul and Kathy were describing. We Muppetized the backflow preventer and the fire hydrants and all that kind of stuff so their guests had something to look at while they're waiting in line. And that's really a Henson kind of thing. So.
There's a few attractions, very few, where people will see that they're using the extended queue and be like, I haven't been there. I haven't been there in a while. We need to go down there. Muppets is one of those where there's so many great gags that you want to revisit them, and you very rarely get the opportunity, but when you do, it's pretty special.
Yes, and as you guys know from being in the show many times, we wanted to figure out how to fit in the studio, the Muppet studio, but how to fit the story into the studio story. So the idea here is the Muppets are creating this new thing called MuppetVision 3D, and so you go through the R&D labs and then entered into their experimental theater that they've mocked up, which of course the Muppets have to mock up this elaborate thing. It can't just be a soundstage. So they built this theater, recreation theater from the Muppet Show, and that's where they're going to demonstrate to us their 3D technology they've developed. And of course, mayhem ensues. So the other thing that was interesting is when we worked with Henson to do the AA figures, the animatronics, and we realized that Statler and Waldorf were, puppet-sized characters, but we were going to be in this large theater. You guys were going to be watching from way back, and you weren't going to zoom in on like you do on television. So we worked with Henson to figure out how to increase the scale of the sculptures of all the figures in the show to make sure that you could see them, but they didn't look grotesque or out of scale. But that was we did tons and tons of mock-ups. Okay, if you make them 3 inches bigger, does that look right? 10 inches is too big. They look like balloons, and that was really interesting. But they were not the same size as the puppets that the Henson people had used.
Was there, obviously, there is one live Muppet performer in the show. Was that an idea from the beginning?
Yeah, that was, what if it was sort of kind of came out of the Great Movie Ride idea. What if we break that fourth wall and a character comes into the audience? That was one of the cards that was on the wall. A live person or a live Muppet comes into the theater. Yeah.
So was that just an idea throughout all the studio's projects? Is we want things to kind of leap off the screen? We want it to feel like you're there.
We'll just go to the next level and surprise our guests and give them something they hadn't seen before. And another thing I remember is Jim they had just created Bean Bunny, that character, and so Jim really wanted to promote him to make him the next sort of ambassador for the Muppets. So that's one reason why he plays such a prominent role in that show. He had not been seen, I think, in like one TV show before that. So he was really introduced to the world there.
So sadly, there's 2 characters in the show that I've heard some people do not enjoy. To a lesser extent, Bean Bunny. Some people think he's a little annoying. Yeah. There's another character. Wow. Tell us how you really feel, Kathy. There's another character that is definitely super annoying. My interpretation is he's supposed to be.
Waldo?
You're supposed to hate Waldo C. Graphic, the spirit of 3D. Is that a correct assumption?
He's supposed to be annoying, but
Yeah.
but that was another thing that Jim was getting into is that kind of computer technology. They were looking at doing computer puppets, not controlling their puppets, but the idea of virtual puppets. And it was just in its infancy, and I can't imagine where they would have taken it by now if it continued. But you know, and other people are doing that with avatars and things like that. So, but that was really
Oh, so was
It was an
someone
experiment.
puppeting a device and then they were computer animating? Is that?
Yes,
Oh,
exactly
okay.
right.
I think that was done in real time when they were filming.
yeah.
I can't remember the.
It was
picture.
very. It sounds like weird today, but that was very experimental at its time and very forward thinking.
Yeah.
When they did that, so whether or not you like the character, it was really cutting edge. And the idea that his nose floated away from his body and he wasn't one solid piece. Jim was really fascinated by a puppet that could break itself apart and come back together again, which obviously wouldn't be possible with felt and
Or start his own football
balls.
team.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. The other thing that show did, which was pretty groundbreaking, was the mapping of the walls in the explosion scene, where that's all projected. And now you just take it for granted, like the castle show and Magic Kingdom and all over the place, and all over the world they're mapping. But that was pretty breakthrough.
Yeah, that was, I mean, nowadays you just get a video projector and shoot it across the theater, but video projectors weren't powerful enough at that time, so we use real studio film projectors, but they only project 2 slides. And those slides, being at the format they were hand-painted. Each one was hand-painted for color correction and for registration. And they were sitting up on big stands, and if you ever went up in the catwalk and bumped a stand, you would be flogged because the thing would lose registration and they'd have to go back up and re-register it. The other thing about Waldo is it was captured real time. It wasn't some guy at a computer. It was an actual puppeteer doing that. And the glove that they used, the technology that Henson invented, was called Waldo, and that's why he's called Waldo.
And the other, another card went up the wall. Said, "What if the theater explodes?" And said, "How are we going to do that?" And so between the projected, but then also scrims on the wall, so you could see the glowing embers behind and the LN2 and that kind of thing. So all of that was, came out. The idea of fireworks in the sky, that not real fireworks, but simulated fireworks that came out of the 3D movie and exploded overhead. It was all just like, we probably had 1,000 cards and narrowed it down to 50 and did all those 50.
It sometimes feels like you used all 1,000 cards because, coming off of Captain EO, this is sensory overload. You have things in the back of the theater, you have things on the side, the top. Every side of the theater is doing something with the guest.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just real quickly, you mentioned the Swedish chef who appears in the back. That was something that Jim and Michael Frith, who is Jim's sort of right-hand creative guy, who stayed with us after Jim's untimely passing, really wanted to have the chef be the projectionist and run the theater and have that whole bit. And one of the things when we were looking at our budget, a lot of people said, let's just get rid of that. Nobody's going to look at it. Why don't you just have a voice back there? And having the backing of the Henson people to say, we really want to do that, we got it. And it really worked. People do look back at it. And that encouraged us later to do the same thing with Donald Duck and Mickey's PhilharMagic. Because I'm sure we'd have the same argument that nobody's going to look back there. But it's so all around
And it's
you.
like, and in PhilharMagic, it's the defining moment,
Right,
I think,
exactly.
of the show.
And that was the next generation of the Swedish chef. So it's these things, we learn our lessons, we take what's good and we take what's bad, we discard what's bad, and we plus up what's good.
Yeah, and I mean, you really sort of, I know EO existed, but you really kind of created a genre. This became the format and the standard for theme park 3D or 4D shows moving forward. Like a lot of this became sort of, everyone kind of copied your homework.
I mean, you're right. And what's one thing that's probably to our disadvantage about MuppetVision is we sort of threw everything into it. And when we started thinking about the next one, we said, what can we do now? We've done everything.
You couldn't top it, yeah.
We did every gag, so it was a lot tougher.
Also everything was story-driven. It just wasn't, let's throw something in your face. It's like, we'll throw something in your face because they did something on screen to make something happen. So it was all just story-driven. And there probably were 1,000 cards. There are a few things that I don't think we didn't have the time to figure out. Like when the Swedish chef shoots the cannon, Jim wanted a cannonball flying over people's heads.
Yeah.
and landing in the orchestra pit,
Pit.
which was a great idea, but we just didn't have the time to figure it. We thought about, we can do moving projection, we can do fiber optics, we can do something, but it's just one of those things that was like the clock was ticking.
And I'll just say, working with Jim Henson and the Henson team, they were the characters. Jim was Kermit, and all of the characters, they knew their personalities, they knew the characters, they knew the environments that they really like to live in. So you'll see a lot of the texture that Jim put into the film. The chickens that are walking through the hallway when they ask, Sam how much, if he's ready. They put live chickens walking down the hallway because that's a texture that Jim liked to use, in his stories, and we did that throughout the entire film.
And then the idea of, having Mickey Mouse in the film and also having, or in the pre-show, and having It's a Small World in the finale was something that we loved it. I mean, it's great, but we had to do a lot of convincing of our other Disney, brand people that was going to be okay to make fun of ourselves.
Parody of your existing theme park.
Yeah, Rizzo Rat portraying Mickey Mouse was a pretty challenging thing to get by the brand police, if you will. but that's what the Muppets are known for, and we didn't want to water down what they were known for. So we said, nobody's going to think that's Mickey Mouse. They're going to know it's Rizzo in a Halloween costume, pretending to be Mickey Mouse. So we went with it, and everybody's happy with the outcome. But It's a Small World was just funny, too, because they said, we want to borrow some Small World dolls. So we have this idea we want to mock up. And then they showed it to us. We said, it's hilarious.
They're the countries that are not mostly America.
Not mostly America,
Yeah.
right, but mostly America, yeah.
Well, can you tell me more about that collaboration process? It's got to be a dream come true to work with the Henson people. I know we have a handful of photos, maybe 2 or 3, that you guys took with some of the folks.
Can we see those?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure we can get those up. But please tell us more about working with the Muppets.
So that's Frank Oz, and he really took over a lot of what Jim was providing on the film, helped doing direct. He finished the film really after Jim passed away, and also provided voices for the movie. But this is close to the premiere. You can see we're at the premiere party in the pre-show. So he was great, and he just continued that spirit of Jim, got us through to the end, and we knew that we had that stamp of approval from the original creators of Muppets that our product. We just didn't fake it after they were gone or after he was gone. We finished it.
Let me just tell a little story about Miss Piggy. We were doing, so this is a 3D film. This was shot in film, so it was edited in film. And as we were going in through the final edits and tightening up the show, I remember we were in an edit bay with Frank Oz, and we were looking at the Miss Piggy segment, and they wanted to tighten it up. And so he was doing, I was sitting next to Frank Oz, and he was doing Miss Piggy's new lines as that we were going through the film. And it was one of those moments you think, I'm sitting next to Miss Piggy. And it was such a surreal moment. He was really a kind gentleman, and but very focused. And it was so much fun to sit there and watch Miss Piggy do her new lines.
As famous and as creative as he was very collaborative. He never ever shot down an idea. If something, he didn't think something would work, he would just go, and you knew that, that we're not going to do that, right? Because
I love the line that they would say, Jim would say whenever we would throw out ideas, he'd say, that's an interesting idea, but I would like to go in this direction. So it's like, okay, got it, on we go. He always acknowledged that you brought value to the story, but he was choosing to go in a different direction.
We have a couple more photos here. I
Yeah.
see there's some conversation.
oh, we're just discussing.
Okay.
Well, this is Steve Whitmire, who took over as Kermit from Jim.
And
When Jim
he's the
passed.
one that did Waldo. He was the Waldo puppeteer.
One other thing about the collaboration between Henson and us was that their writers were really, really funny people, and just sitting around. Bill Prady was their head writer, and how many of you know who Bill Prady is? You ever heard of a show called The Big Bang Theory?
Caroline in the City?
Bill Prady created those. He created after our show.
We trained him.
Yeah. And then Jim Lewis went on to work on the dinosaurs that was on TV.
Which is also a Henson production.
That was shortly after.
Yeah, Steve's picture reminded me of Jim had two sons, Brian Henson, who was, who's also very famous, and John. His youngest son, John. John did Sweetums in all of our mock-ups, and for the first probably week of the show running in the park, that was Jim Henson's son portraying Sweetums as the character, to train the rest of the characters to be a Muppet performer in a live character costume.
How far along was the show when Jim passed?
It was principal photography was done. Jim passed he passed in May, I believe. May 20th, maybe? Someone will look it up. It doesn't matter. So
Awkward silence.
So obviously there was a period of just what's going to happen, and Frank came in and said, "I'll finish it." He looked at all the dailies and said, "I think we need to reshoot some stuff here." And so there was a reshoot of certain scenes, and there's so many versions that were cut together that I wish somebody at some point will be brave enough to release outtakes, because there was so many great, really inside Disney jokes that would never get shown to the public because the Muppets are just riffing, right? But it was really quite funny. So Frank came in, shot some new scenes, and did the editing, did the music and all that, and then finished the project. And then, after Jim passed, the family wasn't sure that they wanted to be in business as close with Disney as we thought. So everything halted on the project for a while. And we tried to keep going. The Henson people wanted to keep going, but we still had to pause for a little bit. And in that pause, we really were, the last part of this was the pre-show. And so the pre-show was one of those things that came kind of late because we had to kind of catch up when things were worked out.
I remember the part with Sweetums and the bouncing ball on the screen and the black void and all that stuff with the Bean Bunny and opening the door. That was all stuff that Frank added late to do it because he felt the transition between the part before that and the finale was not making sense. So that's what I remember. We resaw it a lot.
It's amazing that pre-show is late in the game, because I think most people would agree it's probably as funny as the main show, and people actively will stand and wait. They're like, "Oh no, the pre-show's only half. I'll wait for the next show because I want to see this the whole way through."
Yeah, we went up to the Henson warehouse in New York and pulled a bunch of their stuff, and they were giving it all to us, and we put in some other costumes and things like that. And one funny story about the pre-show is we came late, and we were cycling the main show already, not with guests, but just cycling things. And the doors would open every 12 minutes or so. So they went into the main control room, the computer room, and they pulled some cards out and changed some dip switches and said, "Okay, the doors won't bother us now. Now we can just continue to work on the pre-show without the doors bothering us, but the main show will just keep running." Well, when they put the cards back in, they accidentally hit a couple of other dip switches. And this is where you find out the power of Walt Disney World. In the regular show, when the bubbles come down, they land on people, and you basically take them out with you. Same with the water. Well, when they flipped those switches over, the bubbles came on and stayed on, and the water came on and stayed on. And this was like 2 a.m. We're programming the pre-show, and someone goes into the theater and says, "There's bubbles up to the seats." And you go in, and the carpet was sloshing wet. And somebody called maintenance, and there must have been an army of people with wet vacs, fans, just cleaned the whole theater out by 6 a.m. or so. And it was it's the power of Walt Disney World.
Yeah. I remember the pre-show, I don't know if you guys may know this or not, but Michael Frith and the Henson people contributed a lot of gags to that show. And one that is one of my favorites is there's a big, large net hanging from the ceiling, and it's got cubes of sort of clear plastic stuff, and that is a net full of Jell-O.
That's my favorite. That was
That's
my
right.
favorite, too.
And the other thing in that, and if you look above, there's racks of Muppet costume clothing and that actually one Saturday I went to all the Marshalls in Orlando and bought all the little kids' dresses and pants and things I could find because we didn't have time to make them. So all that stuff came from Marshalls in Orlando. I was thinking about budget when we did that, by the way. It didn't go to Saks Fifth Avenue.
Wow. So you get the finished product you finish the product, opens to the public, you made it, and immediate, I think people fell in love with it immediately. But on the way there, obviously Jim passed away. I know we have, Kathy, you were nice enough to send, we have an image of a card. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
When Jim passed, it was, we were all family with them. And we were working with Joe Lancicero was working with us on the Muppet movie ride. And Joe Lancicero did this image for us. And we actually made, the original art was made into a card, and we all signed it and sent it up to the Henson production company with our sympathies. And
Yeah, Tom Fitzgerald and I can't remember who else, went up actually to they had sort of a memorial in there. And Kathy too, so not really a memorial like
Celebration of life.
A celebration, yeah. So we represented the Walt Disney Company and went with them, and that was really good because, like Kathy said, we were becoming family with these people. We worked with them. They were like Imagineers, and we were like Muppeteers in a way.
And the Jim Henson production was just like that. They lost their dad, and so it was a very family celebration of life. And the one thing that they handed out at the celebration was the little butterflies that you always saw with the little foam. And I had one of those in my office for a very long time until it was no longer existing. I could never like throw it away because it. Yeah. But they embraced us and really took us to the finish line. And when we got the final agreement, it really was only for MuppetVision 3D. So all of the Muppetizing that we were doing on all the facades and in the merchandising shop, we had to go back in and sort of sanitize it back into a New York street, which was a difficult, emotional let go.
And that created a number of venues you had to reimagine at that point.
Yeah, so we did originally the fast food place, which is Pizza Planet for a long time. I think it's now a Rizzo.
It's now Pizza Rizzo, yeah.
That wasn't there when I retired. But anyway, that was originally going to be the Swedish Chef's restaurant. It was going to be basically like a Food Network environment hosted by the Swedish
video
chef
cooking
with
school.
Video cooking school. Thank you. Yeah, that of course didn't happen. The bathrooms were tiled in Muppet colors already. So
We do have some art.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to come up first, but
One of the things in the restrooms at the entrance of Muppets, we had speakers in the ceiling, and upstairs was a dance studio for the chickens. And you could.
this is Mama Melrose, the
Yeah.
rat restaurant. Yeah.
Originally.
Please, I'm sorry.
Oh, this is this was Rizzo's Flying Pizza Restaurant. As you can see, we had the rats
up at the
bringing the
top.
food in through the rafters. And one of the things that the Muppets the Hensons like to say is that the rats sort of, we just found it. We found this, it fell off a truck. And so a lot of everything in here is mismatched because they kind of just,
Stole it.
it kind of fell off a truck.
So you can see up on the top, there's a rafter with the mice with a submarine sandwich, the rats, I mean, and other ones skating in the background. So if you go to Mama Melrose now, there's some air ducts they look like, and some of them are half continued. That's where the track was going to be for these rats, and of course it didn't happen. So we had to punt and come up with another
Right.
thing.
And you can see the bones. I mean, even in the art, the bones is very much what became Mama Melrose.
Yes, right. But we had brick walls, cement floor, booths, red check tablecloths, rat tracks,
Yeah.
which we didn't use. But and we knew it was going to be an Italian restaurant. There was a wood-fired pizza oven that was put in. This is when California Pizza Kitchen was first started, and Walt Disney World said this is a great concept. It was only in California then, so he said let's bring that kind of a gourmet pizza wood-fired thing to Florida. So that was really the first kind of California Pizza Kitchen restaurant in Florida. But anyway, so we did the best we could and said, came with this character, Mama Melrose, and just collected Hollywood memorabilia and all kinds of funky stuff and put that in there. And then the Star program, Star a Day program, we said this is a place we could display those images that they had. That
Yeah.
was so again, make lemonade.
Let's see what else we've got. What's the next one? I think there's only like 5, but this is going to be a great Muppet movie.
Yeah,
ride.
this
This
is-
is
so-
Marcello Vignali, the artist.
Right, and Marcelo and Joe did most of the illustrations for that, and that was we talked about it yesterday and things that never happened, but it really was a parody of the Great Movie Ride, and this is obviously Statler and Waldorf going down over a waterfall with Miss Piggy there, and it was just Muppet mayhem.
A Doom buggy?
Yes, you're right. I think
Yeah.
that's right.
The reason why is because they thought they were going on a VIP tour, and somehow their car got sidetracked into the production.
Yeah, we were. So that was, as I remember now, we were going to use some kind of a Doom buggy-like ride vehicle. So they were guests that got like Kathy said, unfortunately left the track and went to their demise. That was the concept.
So everything that could go wrong, they
They
happened
were
to them.
a running gag throughout the show of them getting in trouble
The mansion went very 101 that day.
or inner space.
Or inner space. What's the next one? Is it more Great Muppet Movie Ride? We have like a Frankenstein
Yeah,
scene.
there's a Beaker being transformed into Frankenstein. He kind of looks like Frankenstein anyway, in a way. But that was, that's science fiction horror scene. And the rats are
They're powering
running the
it,
rat
yeah.
wheel to power the machinery. And then in front is the camera.
Oh, here,
And
another
this is
more.
Peter Pan.
Tinkerbell is Miss Piggy.
Miss Piggy is Tinkerbell, and of course the cable's about to snap, or the rope's about to snap, because that's what happens with Miss Piggy. And Janice is Wendy, and Kermit is Peter Pan, and Fozzie Bear is John.
I love that he has a teddy bear.
And this was Pigs in
Pigs in
Space.
Space.
Remember, Pigs in Space is something they actually did,
Yeah.
so we're going to do a parody of that. So this is basically a Star Wars scene, but done
Yeah.
by the Muppets.
And it looks like that maybe there's a ride vehicle in the middle there. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's.
I think the ride vehicle is like a little
We
tram
never.
car.
I mean, the Doom buggy idea was maybe somebody says it's going to be a ride vehicle, so they knew that when they drew
Yeah.
that. But nothing was locked.
And
down,
also, obviously, I know this is well documented. It says Disneyland also at the bottom there. This was intended for both at some point.
Possibly, yeah.
Nope, we saw that one.
We saw that one, yeah. So
I don't know if there's one more
it was,
restaurant
It was a great concept. We would have loved to do it. Maybe someday we'll. I know. After
Oh,
yesterday's
here we go.
reaction, we wanted to do it again.
This would be the other restaurant.
I guess so. I don't see the video monitors. But
Maybe
anyway,
this is
yeah.
after it, or no, the Muppets are on the wall.
No, this is a Muppet restaurant. But
Yeah, that's definitely. I remember vividly. There was that sort of open space.
Isn't that you, Tom, in the tank top down there?
No, I'm just thinking of what the space was laid out like when it opened.
Yeah, I don't
There was sort of
recognize that
big open
rendering,
space.
honestly, but yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so
But-
that's what the sort of the stuff we talked about. What never happened yesterday. And
Yeah.
that's one of them. But I said by the reaction of you guys yesterday, you'd love to have it again. So maybe we'll see.
I mean, the Muppets continue to be beloved. I mean, they're
Yeah,
timeless, right?
yeah.
And this show is timeless. It's now been with us for over 30 years. What do you think about the lasting legacy of MuppetVision 3D?
I don't know. Well, I mean, we not to go too deep into this, but Walt Disney World has a different demographic than Disneyland. Disneyland is so repeated and so much that I don't think that not that people didn't like it, but they had seen it enough, and they wanted something new. Disneyland turns over a lot faster, so I think it would last a lot longer in Walt Disney World, and I think it's a classic thing. I've never heard any rumors about getting rid of it, so I think it's great. And they're plussing that area up, like putting in the Rizzo Pizza Restaurant. And so, I think the future looks brighter than it used to.
And then there were for those that don't know, a number of updates in the last year. They replaced the seats. They went to a modern projection mapping for Waldo and some of the wall effects. And so a lot of love
yeah.
still going into MuppetVision.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. Well, thank you all.
Yeah, and there's one last thing. The story is timeless. It's not, doesn't rely on cultural current references, so it can play for another 20, 30 years, and it'll still be somewhat relevant. And technology can change and make it better, but the story itself works.
People still laugh as hard 30 years later.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for bringing this to life and enjoying it.